and welcome back to the Whatnauts Reactor Core number 143. My name is Kyle Springer, and I am joined by Melissa Wilkinson. Melissa, how are you?
Good. It's chilly. I'll take it while I can get it, I suppose. Chilly as opposed to cold, I accept.
Sure. Yeah, we had the opposite where it's starting to get warmer today. 74 out. It was so nice. Perfect.
Oh,
Maybe we're gonna do all my work outside on our back little deck there. But
can you?
I can, because I basically work off a laptop. Actually,
Okay.
long story short, my work just supplied me with 2 new monitors that switch between my personal PC and my laptop when I plug it in. So just depending on which one I have, like I don't have to like go fishing for wires, but
That's
it has
nice.
like a separate USB-C plug-in that I can plug in and charge my laptop, and it just works on these screens here. So this is also where I work. This is where I spend most of my time, right here.
You sure do.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of work, we are here to talk more about Severance. This is our part 2 for Severance Season 2. We will be talking about the second half of the season, episodes 6 through 10. So I am excited. I think we have a lot to talk about.
A lot to catch up on.
Catch up on, dig into. I think also I have like my first big complaints about the show and stuff like that. I still really enjoyed my time, but I think maybe these 5 episodes took a different direction than the rest of the show, and I'm not quite sure how I'm feeling about them yet, to be honest.
There are 2 big departure episodes, and typically a show would just focus on one of those at a time. To have 2 of them, I don't think they were back to back. I think there was 1 episode in between, but it is a lot of changes in a very short amount of time that takes you away from some of the stuff you're used to seeing that maybe you kind of miss. I can see that.
Yeah, I think it's less so that I didn't like what they did, but it is the like, well, you only did 10 episodes total, so when you divert and do these like other style episodes, it's like, but then I miss this other stuff. And if this was like a 23 episode season, I'm sure it'd be a-okay, but it's like time is of the essence here.
Right. I miss Irving.
Right? Yeah.
More Irving.
More Dylan. I need more Dylan. More Bert. in the office, right? But yeah, I enjoyed what we got in the second half of this season. I guess to kind of do like I don't really want to do a plot synopsis here since this is a part 2, but kind of generally what's happening. We get we get a flashback episode to see how Mark and Gemma first met and to see a little bit of their romance. We get an episode that gives a lot more backstory to Miss Cobel, who I now like to call Disharmony Cobel. But those were our 2 kind of big departure episodes. We do get some stuff with Bert and Irving outside of the office and see what's happening there. But yeah, we get a little bit less of what's happening in the office and them just hanging out around their computers. But Dylan is, being rewarded by being able to see his wife, his Audi's wife, and there is a blossoming romance that is happening here that I think has a really satisfying conclusion. At least so far with that. And yeah, we get to catch up with what is happening to Gemma. Where is she? Where is Miss Casey? What is happening? We get quite a big answer of what macro data refinement is doing down there.
We know what Mark has been doing. It's less clear what everybody else was doing.
I kind of assume the thing that Mark is doing, they're doing with other people in other experiments, or they are contributing because they're all kind of working together to get the files done. But Mark has this one that's like, hey man, this is yours, like this is your project, right?
That's maybe one of my biggest questions is the rest of MDR, were they also working on Mark's project in just a smaller background capacity, or are they working parallel to Mark doing a similar thing on other
someone
subjects?
Else, right? Yeah. But yeah, I think we get some big answers with that. So kind of still generally speaking, how did you feel about this second half of season 2 now that we've seen it all?
Big departures, big surprises, like really harrowing things, sad, beautiful things, and funny, silly, surprising things. I love Choreography and Merriment. What a choice. It's
incredible.
That stuff. The stuff that like has no real bearing on lore or mystery, but is just incredible set dressing.
Sure.
I love.
Yeah.
That's some of my very favorite touches.
Yeah, it's almost the equivalent of the like there's a room where they're feeding goats in season 1 of just like what is happening here. And it was that like we don't know if that really plays into the bigger mystery of what's happening or not, but here I think it's safe to say it's weird. Like, so they have a division that's focused on like entertainment, but is this like are they entertaining other employees? Or what is happening here? Like, is this just like a school assembly where you get a performance by the marching band playing for their own school, right? Or is this? But it's just weird, right? But it's fun.
Right. Do they perform for all of Lumon, not just the severed floor? Did they perform out there in that giant atrium on the big parking lot in the streets of the little company town?
Right.
Is there one parade every year and it's just Choreography and Merriment? How far can they stretch? Presuming those workers are also severed, how far can they stretch the boundaries of their sever limits?
Yeah.
How far away can they go to the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade?
To be honest, if they don't do that for our Thanksgiving Day parade, if he's not out there like, ooh, yeah, here you go, then we are failing as a society.
We demand Tremel Tillman open the parade this year.
Yes, please. Absolutely.
Replace Santa with Tremel Tillman.
Change.org. Let's start it up. Here we go. I had a good time despite the departures. I liked the departures, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of good stuff in there. I know there was some talk online about the episode about Miss Cobel just kind of being boring. I did not think so at all.
I don't think so. I think it's a more minimal episode than other episodes are. It is literally shorter, and it is a lot more mood, atmosphere, tone. You still learn a lot.
It felt like Lost at its weirdest in the sense of like these are the Jacob episodes before we met Jacob, right? Like her aunt being there in that cabin in the middle of nowhere is like, I feel like that's Jacob here, this like man who may or may not exist, right? But I I still enjoyed it. I think there's a lot to glean from that and pick up and read between the lines there. That was is it just kind of helps build the lore out and makes it that much more interesting for me. I thought these episodes also dived that much further into the kind of religiosity of the cults that is Lumon's corporate structure. There is this idea of purity, which has always kind of been there, but I think they really made it shine here in these 5 episodes. That is just it's so strange and bizarre, and that's kind of what the show has always been, right? So I enjoyed it a lot, a lot. Let's start digging into spoilers.
Yes.
I wanted to keep the like initial thoughts extra brief here, so we could just dive
Right. All we've really
right in.
said
Yeah.
is there's a marching band.
Yeah. Indeed. So I'll do our little spoiler alert thing here so we can get started. There we go. All right. I think we need to start out by talking about Gemma and what's happening to her.
Okay.
That is, I think, kind of one of the bigger core mysteries that kind of got answered here.
Yeah.
And I was listening to another podcast talk about Severance, and one guy was like, they kind of almost could have ended the show with this stuff here, because one of the main core mysteries has now been resolved, and I think that was maybe one of the main hooks that got people into the show, is what are they doing in macro data refinement? Where is his wife here? Like what is happening? And I think this mostly answers that, of what is happening here. And I think for Mark, he's building out different personalities for his wife, who he thought was dead, and Lumon is putting her through these experiments to kind of see how many times they can sever her, and
Yeah.
but also
like
builds personalities, is the way I read that. The way he's like, the way he's organizing the data into these different boxes, each file is a different severed personality for her, but it's not, he's not so much deleting data, just organizing it in different ways. So here's a personality that's happier, here's a personality that has a mix of this and that, here's one, right? That's how I kind of read the whole
happy one, but
situation.
Like it is an experiment in how many times can we break you apart, and how different can each any be from each other. How do they operate in different circumstances? How numb can they be?
Right. When we put objects in front of you that mean a lot to your outie, right? Will that remind you of things? Will you act a certain way, or does it hold? And I thought all of that stuff was fascinating.
Yeah, and you've been picturing such dark things in the exports hallway going down to the testing floor, and I don't think anybody was picturing anything like this. It's the experiment fits right in, but I love the design of that floor. I've never seen anything quite like it, where it's not just a bunch of rooms like down one long hallway like a Scooby-Doo chase scene, but like it's all of these self-contained like boxes. It's like box after box after box within this massive, massive space that we never see the end of. And it feels, I was happy they carried forward that sense of liminality and absolute lack of scale.
Or like you say absolute lack of scale, but also this imagined scale, right?
Right,
Of
like
just
this
not
place must be
knowing.
massive, but how massive? Like, do they only we only ever see Gemma and her nurse and Dr. Maurer. We don't know if you keep running, if you keep turning corners, are there more do they only work on one subject at a time? If they don't, if you would just keep walking, would you find another kidnapped person? Is there another nurse, another Dr. Maurer? Do you go
Right,
into
yeah.
more and more rooms?
Do they when one goes in one door, does another one come out from somewhere else, right? That would be more Scooby-Doo like,
Right,
but
like
still.
yeah, but the idea that maybe there's a dozen people down there right now and they just time it so precisely you never see them,
Right.
that's very eerie.
Right, yeah. Some strange stuff that is happening
Why do you
there.
think Irving was drawing the elevator, the testing floor? Do you think he's been down there? There was an insufficient amount of Irving this season. That's my only complaint.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting one of like why did this stick in his mind so much? And I I'm cuz he had been severed the longest, right? Is that what
I
he
the
said in
longest
season
out of
1
any the
of
longest out of
those
anyone in
4?
MDR,
Right.
yeah, but I still don't think it's like longer than like 4 or 5 years.
I don't know. Do do we know where they do the severed process?
Upstairs?
Because
They
that
must
could.
do it upstairs and then you go downstairs.
Because I'm wondering if it was something like he had to go down to the severed floor to get to that elevator to go down to this other location where they do the severed procedure, and for some reason like that dark hallway with the elevator at the end just kind of stuck with him so much that as like an older version of the tech is kind of becoming like it's wearing out its
Maybe.
welcome. It is starting to bleed through, and so that's why they are running experiments on
Mm,
Gemma to be like, okay, how far can we actually push this?
yeah.
um
I watched the new Rockstars breakdowns, and Eric Voss made the very good point that Irving is the only person who we see have a creativity on the outside. And he's like, maybe like the fact that he is a creative person, he's more imaginative, maybe his brain just works a little differently.
sure,
And the
yeah,
fact that nobody else in our department that we've seen does that, maybe that's why Irving has that bleed through, why he keeps seeing this image. And I wonder if if something similar has been happening with somebody in um pictures.
sure, yeah, 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 yeah.
The Christopher Walken department, the design department, or with the marching band, other folks with creativity. What is their bleed different at all, as
Yeah,
opposed to Dylan, who just sits on his couch and watches his kids watch cartoons?
right, yeah. Still lots of interesting questions. I alluded to these episodes going more into the religious side of
Mhm.
things, and I think that's what like all of this stuff kind of bleeds together in one way or another, right? So you can't really talk about Gemma without talking about something else over here on this side, and what's happening with Mark and his reintegration, and what's happening with Helly, and how all of that stuff. But I think for me, something that at least when I was watching it, didn't think much about, and it was another podcast that was like, we noticed this thing, and immediately once they said it, I was just like,
Mhm.
oh, I see that too now. And it was this idea that the innies are more like this purer self, right? It's a purer version of
Mhm.
yourself, right? Mark is like his Audi is kind of this more jaded, depressed version of himself. And when you get that scene where he's talking on the camcorder back and
then you
forth to
really see it.
himself, yeah, you can really see that. And I think for someone like Irving and Bert, there is this idea that they started to go to church out here, and this church, this Lutheran church, I think it was Lutheran, started to believe that the innies are without sin, right? And Bert wanted that. He had realized that working for Lumon, doing what he did before he was severed, maybe he wasn't such a good guy. He's done some dirty birdie over here, right? And maybe some of the things he was doing was killing people. I know he was not doing that himself, but taking them to areas where the hit would happen, or they would not survive. And so he wants to absolve himself, but he's under the belief that he's done so much that he can't redeem himself on the outside. So if he at least has this opportunity to I can just do this one thing and it's, it's all set, why not, right?
And there's very I want to say there's very few nice things in this world. The idea that there was a church who says, we believe that innies are good and will go to heaven is weirdly sweet, weirdly comforting.
Yeah.
If they are sincerely saying it, and that isn't some sort of Lumon propaganda secretly.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
That's either very heartwarming or very horrifying. It's one of the two.
How can we get more employees to sign up, right? Let's infiltrate the church and have them preach this thing, right?
It's not clear. I think part of the mystery is the vast uncertainty of the severed floor, the number of people who are severed, and therefore, does Lumon have everybody they want? Are they trying to hire more? You see, particularly in season 1, like Natalie will go on the news. They are trying to improve the public image of severing. But I don't know if they're necessarily recruiting for more. Maybe they were years ago when Bert joined. But it's not clear what the status of are they hiring? Are they trying to do more?
I'll get back to the religious stuff in a sec, but there's also, I think, a number of details in here that also might suggest the company is on the downhill. Like they might not have the power or control or resources to do what they really need. That's why in the severed floor, there's just offices and offices and offices that are just empty, right? It's almost like they built this place expecting there to be a much larger workforce, or maybe at one time they had it, but it's just it does not seem like, well, if these people don't know the outside world, why do we need to change the decor from the 50s, 60s, and 70s, right? Like, we can have it be this older thing. We don't need to spend money on that.
We can use our resources second-hand office furniture cheap.
Right. Yeah. Or even like when they killed the security guard, they didn't hire another security guard really after that.
There's no substitute Mr. Grainer. We meet Mr. Drummond, but he is a different role in the company than Mr. Grainer.
And even for Dylan meeting his wife, that first time they meet, they're being supervised of like, okay, no funny business over here, right? And then after that first session, they're unsupervised to the rest of them, and it's just this idea of like, all right, you guys seem fine. We don't necessarily have the can there be a better use for Miss Huang here while she's on her internship? And there's just smaller details like that.
Yes, no, you have a very good point that things are going missing or being destroyed and not being replaced the way you'd think that they would. Like
Yeah.
now that Cobel is gone and they've promoted Mr. Milchick, they don't hire a new employee. They get a student intern who I imagine they don't have to pay.
Yeah. Or even earlier on in the season when that one foreign employee was like, you should have seen our department that had the statues of the Eagans, right? It was just like a mop with a face on it, right? Like they did not have the resources to do all of this stuff, or
Yeah, and like the
somehow
other two,
lost it, right?
they were from a Lumon that closed. Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
you've raised a very interesting point that Lumon is so omnipresent and so powerful, but are there cracks in the facade economically? Like on a wavelength we're not even really looking at. The economics have not really factored into a lot of the drama. It's not like
Yeah.
Dylan got a pay cut. Now we're going to lose Dylan just because he has to go find a different job that pays more. That
Right.
hasn't been part of it.
Yeah. Even when they do the episode for Miss Cobel, seeing the old Loman factory town, like that, I think is a great example of here's a company town that started with real hardworking people, and once the new shiny technology came out, or the new offices were moved 50 miles down the road, they just kind of abandoned this place, and it's just kind of left there in its wake.
And for a company that is so obsessed with its own history that even when you barely have the budget, you must have a perpetuity wing, even if it is paper plates tied to brooms. Why isn't there a museum or some presence in this is the town where it all started?
Right.
Why
Yeah.
don't you have a headquarters there? Why don't you have a museum? Why don't you have tours? Why aren't there devout Lumen employees who make the pilgrimage to the original ether factory? They have truly written it off in a way that we have seen them do with nothing else.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that stuff is interesting. But to circle back to the religious stuff, even with Helly, right? When Jame Eagan saw Helena when she was a child, right? He was like, I see Kier in you. And then as she grows up, she becomes tainted. She's not the daughter they think she is. Maybe she's a little more aloof than they want her to be, right? So when she's severed, and there's that weird scene where Jame comes down to the severed floor,
Yeah.
and does that, he starts to be like, well, I no longer see it in my daughter, but I now see Kier in you. And
Yes.
with these themes of like here's a new version of you, a new self, here's a purer version of yourself here. I think that was just another example of this, like, we're going for this weird purity in like the religious cultier side of things there, which I at least for me kind of leads me to, what is the end goal of all of this stuff? I know at one point, I think
Yes.
last episode, you mentioned that New Rock Stars at one point was positing they're trying to raise the dead or something. I'm not sure if they've changed their tune or not, but
because that was one thing that surprised me. It seems like Gemma has always been alive. They maybe kidnapped her and faked her death. She is not being risen from the dead. She has been believed to be dead, but really been alive, and now they are going to kill her. Just not the order of operations I think most people were picturing. That was Eric Voss's leading theory, that they are trying to resurrect Kier. If they were trying to resurrect Gemma, uh, And when Jame Eagan talks about the revolving in the season 1 finale, there was a sense of maybe they're trying to reincarnate Kier in his descendants. And maybe every generation they refine it a little bit. And so Helena is going to be more Kier than her father ever was.
Yeah, I think just simplifying it to like they're trying to raise the dead sounds a bit. It's like I don't know about that, but I don't think it's that far off. I think you're right. It is something about they're trying to replicate Kier, but I don't know if that's necessarily like we're trying to resurrect him, or is it that they're trying to replicate the process to produce someone like him? Because they like, we know that Kier met his wife in the ether factories, right, but then he like went on to become this great man that started a company, was the CEO, right? There's like this like chest out, like he's amazing, he's incredible. And I think we see some similarities with Mark here, right? Him meeting Helena, them having that romance. I wonder if this is a bigger experiment to see if they can foster up a person who will kind of, you know, like be the next CEO sort of thing,
yeah,
right?
like the company is passed through Kier's descendants, but none of them are as magnificent as Kier. Maybe we need to breed a Kier, and whether that comes from our own bloodline or not
Right.
doesn't matter. It just
Right.
needs
Is
to
that
have Kier's
literal? They're trying
temperaments.
to like resurrect slash breed a new one, or is this like, can you create a model employee through the similar like these steps that his life took, right? If you follow in his shoes, will that create the same kind of person? And I think that idea also fits in with the kind of capitalist themes in the show and stuff like that, right? Of like, how do we create the model employee, right? Do we as employees want to separate our work life and our, like, how does the work and home life balance work here, right? Like
Yeah.
the show
And
is dealing in those spaces.
you think about Kier's mission to presume, as he says, cure the world of pain. Like, I think that's what they say. Kier wanted to eliminate pain from the world. We're
Mm-hmm.
carrying on his mission. We want to make a new Kier, maybe. That makes me think of Ricken and the 3 beds for the baby. Like,
Yeah.
you cannot, if you take away a baby's crib and move them into a toddler bed, that wounds them in some abstract psychological way that might not have repercussions for years to come and might not even be specifically felt. But we must not do anything that could possibly harm the baby. Like this parallel of this weird iconoclastic man whose wife's just like, okay, honey. And it's
Yeah.
like, how do I rid harm from the next generation I am begatting?
Yeah. And I think that's, I this is where I would be like, and Harmony Cobel invents this process to kind of separate your mind, to ease a burden, so to speak, so that
Mm.
I don't have to think about work, right? I just go there. It happens, and then I can go back and watch
Right.
TV and go out and party and do whatever I
You
want, right? Um,
I It seems like her mother was sick while she was at the Myrtle Egan School for Girls when she was doing her own Wintertide Fellowship. Her mother was homesick. I think that's what her aunt says, that she pulled out the breathing tube when
yep.
Harmony wasn't even there. That's got to be her emotional inspiration. I bet I could have been an even better worker for Kier if I was not thinking about my mother. I wish I could turn off all thoughts of home
Yeah.
when I am at work. How
It
can I do that?
So here's, so I think we can dissect what's happening with Harmony here. She has some fascinating stuff in her story
Mhm.
here. Because it sounds like her mother was maybe also a troublemaker, so to speak.
Or
Maybe
was
not.
just at least that aunt seems extremely devout, and maybe it's a case where average devotion, was
Right.
disappointing to
Was
her.
not fully bought into the,
Yes.
like, you're part of the corporate family, right? And was like, all right, yeah, whatever.
Maybe she did follow the company line, but the aunt was just so much more exacting about it. And she's like,
Yes.
compared to me, your mother was nothing. She had
But
no belief in the true value of Kier.
regardless of whether or not she was a troublemaker or just someone who was not fully bought in, did she get sick? Was it an accident? Was this plans by
I
Kier to like weed out the like employees that like, all right, you're obviously not bought in, or you are causing too much trouble here to do that, and Harmony is not seeing that. She just sees like, my mom was
um,
sick. The company maybe didn't do as much for her as I would have hoped, but I'm still bought in, and I believe in the mission they had. And I think the crisis that Harmony is having is that of do I truly believe this company? Is everything I have done for them, do they see it the same way I do? All of that stuff, right? Obviously they don't, right? They took her designs, they did not give her credit, but she's bought in, so maybe she didn't feel like she could ask for credit, right? There's some interesting power dynamics there. There's still that theory that she was like a bastard Eagan child, which still might be the case. We know that Jame sired other children out there, right? Like, we don't know the extent of that. I'm fascinated by her story of
oh, yeah.
what does she do? Where does she go from here? Is she now the one being like, let's burn it to the ground? Which I think she is, but who
Mhm.
knows?
I think her mom, I don't think it needs to be quite that complicated. I think her mother also worked in the ether mines. Her mother got sick from the ether mines.
Yeah,
And the company just in a more eh, those commercials you see on daytime TV about mesothelioma risk. It's more like that. It's one of
but see,
those.
as much as that
The
sounds
company just didn't step in a more everyday way of, you exposed your employees to dangerous chemicals. Can you not at least help
sure,
with the health care?
I think Occam's razor would be like, yes, that is probably what
Yes.
happens. But also, again, with the show playing in these spaces around corporations and capitalism and stuff like that, we see a lot of techniques that corporations use to bust unions and stuff like that, and try to like the employees don't have power here, telling Milchick to like, don't use such big words here, dumb it down. I don't like that you're educated and might like think of a way to
Mm.
outsmart us, right? So if there is an employee that is be like, man, these working conditions suck. Why does my child have to work in these factories with
Mm.
this harmful chemical? Right? This is not good working conditions. And I also feel like it's just as plausible for them to like, all right, what if an accident happened, and that takes care of that problem. Um, but I like, that's also the thing. I don't think season 3 will be answering that question, right? It's
Yeah,
one of those things
there's
of
plenty
like,
of other stuff to
it's
do.
just in the background that's happening. It's a
And
fascinating side
and it's
thing.
great that it has the kind of depth where you can look at it and speculate and read it multiple ways.
Right,
To
exactly.
talk more about the corporate mission, we never came back to Ricken maybe writing a version of his self-help book specifically for innies. And when we saw him, he was meeting with Natalie about it. And Natalie has always been a fascinating character for me,
Right.
where she seems to be 100% the representative of the company, representative of the board, always listened to, but in a way where she feels terrified and trapped, and then we don't know how much she actually believes, if she is as trapped as it seems like she is. I wonder, depending on how closely they are listening to her, I wonder if maybe what we think is Ricken falling for some scheme and becoming a corporate stooge, maybe Natalie is very secretly, very quietly steering him in a
Mm.
particular direction that may be against the company line. We know nothing about her.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know if we ever will. She's not a major part of the show, but you do feel so bad for her. I
Yeah.
would really appreciate it if there is a good development and conclusion on Natalie's character.
I gotcha. Yeah. 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 Um, Something else that I thought was interesting that this podcast I listened to it was Remap Radio's
Thank you.
coverage. They also brought up the fact, like, when she interacts with Milchick in the first half of the season, and there is that moment where he's asking her like what her opinion is, and it does have this like gun to your head
Yes.
feeling to it all. They brought up the idea that, like, I wonder if there's even some aspects of, like, she's much lighter skinned than he is. Not that she's like white passing, but like,
Mhm.
there is this like, I'm white enough that they like have been able to grant me a job higher up. Please don't fuck this up for
Yeah,
me
but
here. Um,
it's she's literally higher up in that she doesn't go down to the severed floor very often, and she does get to go outside,
right, but like,
whereas
I
Milchick
but
doesn't. But I think out of the two of them, Milchick is freer than Natalie.
yeah, I think
It's
what they were getting at is like, who knows, there might be some, like, I'm white, I don't understand exactly the dynamics of like dark skin versus light skin stuff. That's not my experience. The thing I can
mhm.
think of is like, maybe she is taking care of a family and needs a higher paying job, and so she might have scored that. Maybe
Mhm.
she's not fully bought in, but is playing the part, and
Yes.
is like, look, I agree with you, but I can't really say anything. I just have to grit my teeth and wave, right? Like, she's in a position where she can't really badmouth the company because she
Mhm.
is the PR, she is the like mouth for the board. They're usually always listening in on her conversations. Right, what can she do here? But
I
I
I
don't know.
wonder I wonder a lot about the motivations of different people for working at Lumen. I mean, it does seem like if you don't work, everything is owned by Lumen. What isn't owned by Lumen in this town? What are like the other options aren't clear. I guess you can
Mhm.
go work at the door factory like Dylan tries to do.
But do they make
It
doors for Lumen? Is that their
like
main
his
contract, right?
uh what the finale is an interesting turning point in Milchick's story where everybody has started to hate him and he does not seem to like what he's doing. He is just trying to hold everything together as best as he can out of
Right, yeah.
questionable obligation to Lumen. It doesn't seem like he has the same belief in the system as much as a general sense of duty. Like
I
he
don't
doesn't
know.
have the religious quality to
Yes,
him that other characters have.
I would agree with that.
And I can very easily see the next season being Milchick turning against Lumen, uh, but
I think
secretly
that'll
he is
happen too.
working with the Innies. Because what is he getting out of this? He's
Yeah.
gained nothing. No, we wound up in a situation where nobody likes Milchick.
Right.
No
And
person he knows likes him at the end of this season. Just us, the audience, love him.
yeah, I like that's a super interesting thing because yeah, we have that moment in the finale where Dylan is like, "Fuck you, Mr. Milchick," and it's a great moment that mirrors the finale of season one, but
Mhm.
also yeah. With his interaction with what was his name, Mr. Drummond, right?
Mhm.
The big white guy who he tells him to go I forget the words he used, but he's like, go eat shit, right?
Yes.
um like I like that he is starting to butt heads with the higher ups, and I think you're right. I think he will go down a path where he ultimately changes sides, but we do see glimpses of him. There's that one really odd scene where he like moves some files out of the
Yeah.
way and has this like hidden mirror and light that
What?
he
Yes.
looks in and like
Why is it hidden? Yes.
does this like punishment thing that they almost did a similar thing to Miss Casey in season one with her,
Mhm.
where he's
But
like repeating this mantra, but it's
he
self-imposed, right?
yes,
And
he is doing it to himself, and it is reduced down to a single word: grow, grow, grow. Whereas what the break room used to be was that he would make somebody say this long, formal apology. And even though he
right.
is one given to formal language, that never felt like it was coming from him. It felt like he was merely the person carrying it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I cannot wait to see where his stuff go. I think he's been I mean, he has been a fan favorite, but I think this season really elevated
Yes.
him to like, oh yeah, he's one of the best characters on the show. He's incredible.
I've mentioned before that he's so inscrutable. M- Like, you can sort of see how he's feeling, but you have no idea how he got here and why he's in this situation and where he comes from. I was thinking for a long time, maybe he's a military man. He has
Yeah,
that precision, that adherence to law and order, the sense of, I don't question the orders, I just carry them out to the letter. But when you see him in the music dance experience in Defiant Jazz in the first season, when you see him with this marching band, like maybe he wasn't necessarily a soldier. Maybe he was a USO entertainer where he's in that world of rules and order and tradition and honor and uniformity, but he was responsible maybe less for serving and protecting, but to try and bring people happiness, to try and take care of them. And that's why whenever these things come up, he slips into it so effortlessly. This guy can dance.
oh yeah.
Why? Is that like it's not it's so strange that it's a mystery, but it's a really interesting part of his character that he's so stiff and formal, and then when he gets the chance to dance, he like lets loose. He's so fluid. He's so
Yeah,
good at it. And he seems to really care for morale.
yeah,
He wants the things he does, whether it seems like it's coming from him or from Lumen higher up. He seems to want it to work. He
yeah.
wants to be in a positive environment, I think.
Absolutely. Two things. First, apparently, that scene where he's given Dylan the apology letter from his
Mhm.
Audi, and then
Mhm.
runs out of the room here. First of all, hilarious. Loved
Yes.
that scene. Apparently, that was not planned.
Oh my
And
god.
that's why the scene you only see like the top half of his head as he runs out. They did not know to like get that. It worked out perfectly. I think that is great.
It's
Um,
it's so funny and it's so accurate to the journey his character has been on since the end of last season where it's
right.
like, you're on your own. Cobel's not here, Grainer's not here. Milchick alone has to sustain everything.
Exactly.
Literally have to run from one problem to another.
The second thing, let me ask you this. Do you think but I don't remember the full name, the Merriment and Division.
Choreography and Merriment.
Thank you. Do you think they are severed?
Most likely.
Okay.
But we don't know. There's such an when it comes to the other departments, we know MDR and O&D are severed. We it's so far, and then when you get to the other departments, it's like mammalians nurturable,
Right.
merriment and choreography. You're like, I want to say yes, just because they also work down
The
here, and if they
naming
weren't severed,
convention
why would they be
seems
here?
like
Yeah, they all
they're
seem
on
like
some part of the floor.
they're all part of the same pattern. And then there's the folks we know, unless they're pulling some wild, subtle, crazy twist on us, aren't, like Cobel, Milchick, Grainer, Drummond. But then again, we also felt the same way about Miss Casey for 9 episodes in season 1. Uh, it has always been yes or no, and we so far have not had evidence except for Helena Eagan sneaking down there of, you're all severed except for that one. That's just a whole person who goes up the
Yeah.
elevator and they're still themselves at the end of the day. They never mix them as peers among a team.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask that because I feel like they are probably severed too. I don't know if we can say for sure because again, like do they perform at other corporate events elsewhere? Right?
Right.
Who
And like,
knows?
to what end? Where have they been this whole time? We can assume this is the same department who did the waffle party. But still, it's you have that many people to do something once a season? And like in the time of the show, who knows how many months that is? Like, what else do
Yeah.
they do every day? Mammalians nurturable, optics and design, they have day-to-day work. Does merriment and choreography just practice 40 hours a week to get to do something twice a year?
Who knows? I'm sure they're creating songs and art and stuff like that. But because I wonder. So we've seen examples of people go down to the severed floor, and that's when the severance technology kicks in.
Yes.
We know that they have ways to turn it off by Helena sneaking down there, right? We know that
Yes, the Glasgow block.
they have other locations like the birthing cabin thing that they have
Yes.
there. I'm wondering if there are examples of them turning on a severed personality permanently. And I wonder if Mr. Milchick is one of them because he seems like someone that fits in so well with choreography and merriment. What if that department, what if he is originally from that department and that like he is the kind of person that department would raise up, like wanting to be in a good environment where everyone is happy. Let's get you a waffle party, let's get you this, here's a musical experience, right? He seems like a manager that came out of a department like that. I don't think that is necessarily the case. Who knows? But I just think that that's something that's interesting to think about. That might be why he fits in so well with that and why he's so bought in. But also, we don't have an example of him acting different on the outside. We get that one glimpse of him interrogating Dylan that one time in their closet. Right, but that just kind of makes me wonder if they can turn it off and on or stop it whenever they want. Who's to say that he is like not permanently severed? This is just the new personality that they have written on him. Something to think about. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know if this is what's happening, but it is an interesting idea. What if there
Right.
is
Exactly.
what
Yeah.
if there was years ago, early on in the days of the program, a person who became severed, and their innie became so prominent and well respected? Would they ever have the power to say, I never want to be an outie again? And
Right. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
then I imagine we would have already seen it. Like,
But
can't
that's the thing. I think they can easily make a reveal like that whenever they want, right?
like we've had cases where Helena will not let Helly die. Helena will not let Helly take over. Dylan wants to resign, and this might be one of the most positive things in the whole show that is outies like, this is my thinking. I I like knowing that you're there. The choice is yours. I'm gonna give you my reasoning for why I think we should keep going the way we have. I think I kind of understand you. I kind of like you. I kind of admire you. I don't want you to go away. But check yes or no yourself. The
Yeah.
option's yours. Um, yeah, maybe once long ago there was like somebody who was a trusted part of the Lumon family who underwent the severance procedure, and the person who was severed, the innie became so much a part of the family that they're like, just get rid of the other me. What do you need them for?
Right.
Just
Or
me. Keep me.
with James seeing Kier in Helly R rather than Helena,
Right, is
right?
he going to keep her forever as Helly? And he's like,
Exactly.
"I don't want
Yeah.
Helena back. She eats eggs weird."
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, like I don't think it'd be hard for them to do some kind of reveal like that. Um, but again, I think this is a show that has a lot of mysteries surrounding it on the outer bit, much like Lost, much like Yellow Jackets. Whereas
Yeah.
I feel like the show is maybe trying to get at something else. It is trying to tell more human stories rather than like, well,
Right.
what if
This
this one guy is severed the entire time, right?
it's like it's never going to turn into the final season of Dark where they have to pull off all of these time travel mechanics and reveal that like this girl was her own grandmother, and it's a cool reveal, but along the way it's lost a lot of the emotion.
I don't know. Dark ended perfectly, in
I
my
I
opinion.
think
It's great.
there are more sincerely emotional parts of Dark, but there's a point
Sure.
in the
Yeah.
final season where it seems like the train just has to keep chugging along, time travel connivations, and somebody like I think we see a character like have a child and then the child dies and then the child's their own grandparent and all this wild stuff happens, and it's just like the you've lost the emotional thread on this person. They're just like a series of logic problems, and I don't think that's what Severance is going to be.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So I feel like some of the heartbreaking stuff, kind of at its core, is these relationships. Either these love triangles, so to speak, between like Irving and Bert, and I forget John Noble's character's
Fields,
name. Fields. Yeah.
man,
Thank
what?
you.
I wonder if we're ever gonna see him again. Like you got to use all the John Noble you can, but on the other hand,
Right.
what a what a triumph to come in and just kill it for a single scene.
Yeah, great actor. You know he's incredible. But also, yeah, underused in a weird way, right? But then also to have the love triangle between Dylan, his Audi, and his wife,
Yeah.
right? But then also this love triangle between Mark and Gemma and Helly. and the
And
heart.
Helena also. It's
Yes, though
it's like a love triangle where one of the points of the triangle has a second point of its own triangle.
but
It's recursive, it's fractals.
I don't think that's really the case. I don't think she loves him. I don't think he loves her. They're not interested in one another in that sense. I think she's just really trying to manipulate stuff.
Okay.
I think she's trying to get in the way that things have escalated between Helena and Helly of like, no, you stay down there. Here's a video lightly slapping you on the wrist, and then Helly was like, I'm gonna hang myself in a way that you wake up in the middle of that because fuck you, right? And then for her to then turn around with like, oh, but you like Mark. What if I had sex with Mark and tried to like break you guys up and ruin that? Like there is this like one-upsmanship between them that I don't feel like is really like, but I like him too, right? But in the finale, that final scene where Gemma is outside on the like on the other side of the stairwell door, calling for Mark, who she does not know is severed. And
Yes.
to see her husband turn around and go with this other woman that she probably recognizes as Helena Eagan because she was working for Lumon even before all of this accident stuff. You saw her with the card with the martial arts stuff in
I
the
don't think that was her working for Lumon. I think
they're
she
in a
was saying
company
like
town.
I don't think she was working directly for Lumon as we know it, or that as she knew it. She goes to the fertility treatment center and then she's doing that weird activity with the cards. And she's like, I don't know, they sent it to me. It's like a personality test or something. I think that came from the fertility treatment center. I don't She was a professor at the school in
Sure,
at like Gans College. As much, I mean, it seems like
but they're
everybody works for Lumen in some way or another, but I don't think she was
exactly.
working for Lumen in the same way we usually mean it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. You can work for Loman in all sorts of different positions, right? It seems like Bert was a fixer of sorts, right?
Mhm.
He's the old like retired Michael Clayton of of what was happening there, right? But like my point is that like it like she probably recognizes Helly as Helena and is just like, what the hell is happening? Like, what is my life
Mm.
now? And there is, yeah, I think there's all these really interesting love triangles and relationships between these characters. But also, yeah, they live
Question.
in a company town. Was she a plant from the start? I don't know. Yeah, who
That is
knows?
a big question. When did Lumen start to target her? Does it go back to when they first met, before they first met? Was it at the fertility treatment center? We don't know. Uh, why her is a big question. We learned
Yeah,
what was happening to her, but we don't know how it fits into the larger puzzle and why it had to be her and who else this may have happened to.
right.
In a world where it seems like Lumen has their fingers in every pie, like Dylan's wife is an EMT, but you can very easily imagine in the town of Kier and the principality of Egan, like, they work for Lumen.
Yeah.
Who are the only characters who don't? Uh
Door
Ricken?
salesman number one,
Why?
Ricken,
The Devon, for a show that is so
Devin. Yeah,
fascinated with professional lives. Of course, she's just had a baby. You can imagine she's on maternity leave. There's no allusion to what Devon did do before she had the baby. She's this weird neutral ground. I
Yeah.
wonder if this will play into something that she's, I don't know, she's a non-worker in this work-obsessed world. I mean, not to say that her being a wife and mother isn't work, but you know.
Right. Yeah. She is. She might be the stay-at-home spouse, um, or
But
at
she
least just like not the breadwinner of the family, as Ricken's books might be the thing that you know.
and it might be published by some subsidiary of a sister company of Lumen. Like, I don't I'm just curious if that will hold any power if we have a
Yeah, I don't
singular
know.
character who is completely outside of the Lumen economic cycle. We have one outsider who can break it.
Yeah. Or how his book will play into season 3. Will it inspire some other revolution? We already have that hint of
I
MDR rising up once before. Um,
Yeah.
is the stuff that Helena is excuse me, is the stuff that she's doing, is that more selfish and petty, or is she trying to manipulate a certain response out of people? Like, it is it because you know, I think there are moments where Helly and Helena, they're like true unified self, that like the overlap of
Mhm.
the circle Venn diagram, where I think that shows through this idea where Helly was like, I didn't like who I was on the outside, right? I believe her there.
Mhm.
I think she truly does not like the family she's a part of, but
Mhm.
I think Helena is also, I don't know, like it feels like she's trying to manipulate things, but I can't tell if it's for the company or
Y
petty selfish stuff of
Yes.
like, you tried to
We
kill me, right? Like, I'm gonna get
we have
back at you.
s we have such little context for Helena. We we see her more this season, but we don't have a sense of what is the rest of her familial and professional life outside of what we've seen her doing. Are her and Jame the only living Eagans at this moment, besides any bastard children Jame may have? And we say bastard children like it's something that happened out of wedlock, but there's no wife or mother alluded to at all. Where did Helena come from?
Yep. Yeah.
We don't know what her life was up until she got severed. She's such a weird blank slate in some ways that even though she's done dastardly things, I'm hesitant to be against her because I'm like, I just don't know anything about her.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, I think overall I really enjoyed this season, but this second half felt not worse, but like I was saying, like they're trying to put so much other stuff in there. Like it felt like they almost
Yes.
could have, like the season finale reveal almost could have been like, no, that was Helena the whole time, right? Like,
Yes, this season packed a lot in there. We got
exactly.
farther than I thought we would have gotten. You're right. The fact that by the end of episode 4, it's like that was Helena. By the end of episode 3, Mark has started reintegration. We find out where Jim has been in like episode 6. It's packed full of things.
Yeah.
And the things I didn't like were only that they would start something and then it wouldn't be dropped. I mean, if we get to the end of the entire series and it's like, weird, we never saw Ricken again, that would
Right,
be
yeah.
them truly dropping something. But they put a lot on the back burner. So far in the back burner that you
Or
can't see
glossed
the
over
stove
stuff,
anymore.
yeah.
Right, like what happened to Ricken? What's the deal with Ragabi? She's such a mystery. We don't know a lot about her as lore, but also she is
Also, she
not
murdered someone and there's no mention of like a murder investigation
right.
to stop it.
Okay,
Like,
so the fact that Mr. Grainer died is just not important.
right?
There's stuff like I guess we're never mentioning Petey again. I guess Petey, this whole story served its purpose. Like Ragabi, I wish we knew better. I wish she had more characterization. Like we've talked about how we don't know anything about Milchick, but we can read his feelings and his personality. I can't do that with Ragabi as well. She's
Yeah.
this odd character operating on the fringes of the story who feels more like she's there to drive the plot forward and is a little bit less fully realized
Hmm.
compared to other characters.
Yeah.
Um, but I'd like to find out what her deal is. There's uh Irving. When do we see Irving again? Like I said, a lot less Irving this season than I thought.
He
I think the struggle
legitimately
has
got sent
been
out to pasture, right?
yeah,
Who
him
knows where
and his
he's
dog.
going?
Yeah, there's stuff that just when you focus on something else, this is not a show that juggles a lot of things simultaneously. It really will move on from something and do a different thing. It's not like I don't like the new thing it's doing. We took fascinating detours, we learned really interesting things. There are things like I don't I can imagine that guy Cobel was friends with who we saw up in Salt's Neck. That might have been all of him that there ever was, but I don't think we're ever going to see that midwife that Mark dated for a couple episodes in season
Yeah.
one again. We're not going to see like Petey's daughter in a rock band again. Sometimes there are things like weird that was just not here for 3 or 4 straight episodes.
Yeah.
And when there's only been 20 total episodes, like big gaps like that can be felt.
Yeah. Certainly. Yeah, I just like the scenes where they are just hanging around their computers working. I think are really valuable to the show because it gives both you as a viewer and the characters themselves a chance to just kind of process what happened.
Yes.
And we got a
We're
lot less of that in this
yeah,
season, and I need them to just sit around and be like, did you know there's a whole other department that's just a giant marching band over here, right?
right.
And stuff like
We
that.
need a
I
return to home.
Yeah.
We need like a staff meeting.
Yeah.
We need all of them huddled in like the supply closet again. You're right. The work aspect, the workplace dramedy has been lost a little bit this season, which isn't bad, but I think every once in a while, you said just sort of like, can we come back to the status quo and sort of like recap and reset a little bit?
Yeah, I think we need some more of that, and not like we have an entire episode where that's all they do, but like I just need that sprinkled throughout more of whatever the next
Mhm.
season is, which season 3 has been confirmed, so that it's good. I don't think they've really ever started working on it yet, or stuff like that. It was um, just announced like, oh yeah, we'll definitely do a season 3 of this. But also, I kind of hope they end it with season 3. Like
I I
I
think
feel
you
like,
mentioned something like that, that's how much it was planned for. And I can see
yeah,
with the pace the show has been going, 3 seasons is all it takes.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, I think the status quo that we're left with right now is this kind of civil war between the innies and the outies, almost, or at least for
Yeah.
Mark, the leader of it all. Which, by the way, I didn't know this. Cold Harbor is also the name of a battle in the Civil War. Um,
Uh,
I
yeah.
did not realize that. I'm not a war expert or military fanatic, but hearing that was like, oh, interesting name considering it's a civil war, like a country warring against itself, a person warring against himself, right? And I think that's kind of the status quo that Mark is like, no, I'm my own person, down here.
Yes.
I have my own life. I want to be my own entity here. I don't want to reintegrate or do that. I
Mhm.
want to be separate. Um,
Which has been the tension in the show since episode 1, since the very beginning. even when you're just starting the show, I think you wonder, what's the win condition here? Like, how can this ever be resolved?
And I think this idea of trying to resurrect Kier, if it is something a little more literal, I'm wondering if they do have some kind of memory template on ice, right? Of like, we've captured his memories and we want to basically manipulate someone's personality to get a blank slate that we can then put these memories in. And
This reminds me of the urban legend about Walt Disney's frozen head. But
I
instead
haven't
of it
heard the
being a
head. I've
literal,
heard his entire self has been on
I've heard
ice.
mostly head. But yeah, the idea that there's no physical remnant of Kier anymore, but yeah, in almost like a weird Armin Zola way,
I'm
his
wondering if they have a
mind, his
personality.
memory is
Yeah.
somewhere.
And I wonder if that is maybe a win condition for the show. Maybe not the one we get, but maybe one that they're contemplating or thinking about of like, is there a way to get any Mark in a different body that can live on the outside or do whatever he wants, right? Or does the Audi get a new body or something like that, right? I don't know. It's weird, right? It feels like they're trying to groom some kind of
From are they going to live as a goat? What's around? What can they be put in?
I mean,
Or do they have
who
to
knows? Maybe they
do
are
they have to be
experimenting
computers
with
like Armin
cloning.
Zola?
I don't know if they're cloning. I don't think that's the case. I don't think they're trying to make robotics to a point where it's like you're so lifelike. I don't think it's that. I think they're trying to get someone to sacrifice themselves, basically. Of those three options, I think that's the more like in line with the show. They're trying to overwrite someone's memories and personality to be what they want.
Yes.
Do I think that is what they will do with the show? Maybe not. Probably not. But if that theory is what they end up with, right? I think that's what the road they may go down there. Of like, we're putting
Speaking
Mark
of robotics,
S's personality in someone else.
Speaking of robotics, I love when he completes Cold Harbor and it's out come the fog
so
machines
creepy.
and the Alan Parsons Project. And
it is so creepy.
The fact that the Kier animatronic is so basic. Like, that is sub Disneyland 1955. It's not even at that level. And just doing this vaudeville bit with Milchick that Milchick like is entirely at his expense and he's fuming about it, but he's like, just gonna put this behind me and just do marching band.
Another example of right of him being like, I don't align with the people at the top, even though I might be bought in, but also I just want to dance, right? Just let me dance.
But that's my only commitment to sparkle motion.
God, now it's almost the thing. Like, do we get another moment like that from Milchick in season 3? Do we get another musical dance experience?
A third time. He must dance a third time.
He has to. But
prophecy must come true.
But like, that's the thing, is like I also don't want to corner the show into it must do these specific things for it to be good, right? They could do something else. It could be a completely different character that does the musical dance experience, and we'll be sitting there like, I didn't know I needed this, but this is awesome, right?
Right.
He becomes the new lead singer of Petey's daughter's punk band and puts on a punk show. Down with Lumon. Whatever.
What do you think is going to happen in season 3? Because where we left off, there's some things, again, more characters. After the scene in the birthing cabin, I was very curious how much time has passed before they get Mark downstairs again? Because he comes back and there's a completely new painting, which seems like it was a celebration of him completing Cold Harbor. So O&D may have
Yes,
already been
yeah.
working on it. And it's fascinating that that painting is everyone that any Mark would have ever seen, including them tracking when they did the overtime contingency and he was walking around at Ricken's party, like Ricken's friends are in
Right,
that
yeah,
painting.
yeah.
Why? Why are you it's so weird that we start the season with like, yes, we thank you for the Macrodat uprising, but all that's kind of fallen away by the season finale, and that's like the one remnant left of it. Yes, we celebrate that you broke the rules and you went out into the real world and met
It
some
taught us a valuable lesson. I mean, this is what companies try and do, right? They try and spin the narrative if something goes wrong to be like, but this was actually a positive. Like we learned this thing. Now we can save money on X, Y, and Z, or we can now, like, you are now the face of the company and we can tout you around to, dance like a little puppet and do all that. But they do those things where it's like, here's a weird painting, here's a weird little party to celebrate this thing that you did here, that right, like, companies do weird things like this sometimes, and I don't know, the whole thing is just creepy.
uh so there's the question of how much time has passed and where
Mhm.
are Devin and Cobel now? We didn't pick back up with them after the scene at the birthing cabin. So I'm curious where we will find them at the start of season 3. It seems like season 3 is going to be, I think Mark and Helly might just be on the run in the severed floor.
Ooh,
Like, the
interesting.
kids' book from the mixed up files of Mrs. Basil E. Frankweiler, where these two little kids are like, we're going to live in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. We're gonna like hide in the bathroom stalls after hours, and then we're gonna sneak out, and then we're gonna like sleep in a historic bed and just get up before the janitors arrive.
Night
And
at the
we're just gonna
museum.
like, right. Are they another Ben Stiller project? Are they gonna do another museum? I I let's really stretch the boundaries. Let's see the
Yeah.
characters stretching the
So
boundaries of what's down here, what's in the severed floor,
you
how
bring up
far
a
can
good
we get?
point.
And there is in season 1 when Petey draws Mark the map, I think part of the map is that there's houses and he's like, I think people live down here full time. I think Mark and
Mm.
Helly are just going to go running and hiding. And that's what season 3 is. They're they're lost down here. They hid themselves down here. How do we get them out? How do we extract them from the severed floor?
That's
And
an
it might be
interesting.
Gemma on the outside trying to figure out how do I get back in and get my husband out of there.
I think you bring up a really good point, because we talked about part of the final scene in the finale, but at the end, when it's Mark and Helly running down the halls and stuff, I'm sure you noticed this, but it starts to get that like film grain look, and
Yes.
apparently they did shoot that on 16 millimeter, and who knows, but it has this very 70s spy thriller vibe to it in a way
Mhm.
that nothing else in the entire show has done before.
Yes.
And that, like, when I was watching it, I joked with Rachel to see them running towards the camera. I was like, an explosion happens behind them, right? Like, and like it looked like that kind of thing. It looked like Harrison Ford, the fugitive, right? It looked like a
I think
James
it's
Bond kind of thing happening
a
there.
little bit. I
um
think it's mostly The Graduate, but there is a little bit of romantic thriller tossed in there.
Sure, yeah, but like my point is that I think that's kind of what they're laying on, right? This spy thriller on the run. I mean, even in more modern day stuff, Captain America: Winter Soldier was laying on those same things, right? Where he is now a fugitive on the run, has to hide
Goes
in it, right?
goes into a basement, meets a guy who lives in a computer and has no more body.
Exactly. But yeah, I feel like they really could hide down there and meet some interesting players
Yeah.
down there too, especially if the goat people are a little bit more on their side now. If
Yes.
it seems like choreography and merriment might also be feeling some of the same vibes there of like F you Milchick, right? When they're like it could happen to you too, and they seemed to kind of be instantly radicalized, which maybe implies they were already kind of dealing with some of that stuff on their
Yes.
own.
What
But
what are their specific grievances? That's a good question. Who's
yeah,
is Milchick their Milchick, or did they have their own Milchick?
exactly. So yeah, I think that's a great guess. Um, to be honest, I really don't know. I think in the same way that we have now said like they might stay down there, I think we'll see some interesting new team ups. I'd like to see Irving, Cobel, and Gemma team up uh somehow. I'd
Let's
like to
throw
see all them kind of come together because they've been all or like they might now be all the ones being like let's burn this place to the ground
Yeah.
along with Devin. You can toss her in there too, right?
I'd love
Like
if Radar the dog is still there. I want him to
yeah,
bring Radar along. What a great little piece of chaos. There's just a dog loose on the severed floor, and they're like,
chasing
"Hold on,
goats. Yeah.
the goats we know. Whose dog is?"
um I
I,
would love it if there's a stowaway, like the idea of a stowaway storyline, someone that Lumen forgot and like has been living down
uh,
there, or like thought already left or thought died or something, right?
I in episode 1, when the Annies are saying when they're talking about how Petey left and now they have Helly, and they're like, "Is this how it always goes?" And they're like, "Well, do you remember when Carol D left?" I don't know if that was just a throwaway line. We have very little sense of the history of the MDR and,
Mm-hmm.
like, who was there before it was Mark and Petey and Irving and Dylan?
Yeah.
Was it always them? How did it start out? Who's Carol D? We've never come back. I don't know if that's significant or not. If it's just window dressing, it's really the only kind of window dressing like that that they've done in that context, referring to past employees who have just like resigned like
Yeah.
normal. Like when Bert retires, that seems sort of new and unfamiliar. What's the story there? I do wonder if we're gonna meet Carol D, and maybe Carol D is still down there.
Maybe. Who knows? Yeah. Um that or what happened to those other severed employees that were the replacements, right?
Yes,
We do see that one being like, I'm about to sue you guys like for all
I
that.
I
You can't do this to
imagine
me.
they were, like, released and they're out there in the wild, but yeah, is Bob Balaban out there still holding a grudge? Is he gonna come back?
Yeah.
That is a good
Yeah.
question.
Um I don't know. Yeah, I would like to see Petey's daughter come back. I think if you're not gonna have Petey himself come back, like she was also obviously very much in her feelings and felt some type of way about Lumen and what they're doing. We saw those protesters that were passing out the
Yeah,
flyers and
there
stuff. Like
hasn't been any more of that this season,
I
yeah.
kind of want to see that stuff come back in. And how does the wider world really feel about what's happening, especially after this event, like this big event. We don't know how the rest of the world truly sees that. We only got this corporate Lumon video that I don't think we even mentioned that Keanu Reeves was the voice actor who narrated that. Does Keanu Reeves play a character in season 3? And we could be like, that's the guy that got to narrate the video, right? I don't know.
Like we meet who he is in universe as just a hired actor.
Yes,
like maybe he's the voice of every Lumon commercial.
Right. Yeah. He is the voice of Lumon. Yeah, like I really don't know what's gonna happen. This is one that I'm just at a complete loss for. There could be
like I
so
think
many
I
things.
can see how the season would start, but it's been so surprising. You know, it gives you all of these detours and departures and like, what do you mean there's goats? What do you mean there's a marching band? Like it's gonna pull some weird tricks on you at any given moment. And I like to be surprised. I love
I
that
would
this is
also
a living mystery box where you could come across anything down on the severed floor. It's
I
a
think
magic place.
something else that we haven't truly seen. We've seen it from the other direction. There's those scenes of everyone running down the hallways, right, and the camera is right in front of them. I would almost like to see that from another perspective, from a first person perspective. It like we are Mark running down the hallways, or better yet, we are someone and we don't know who it is.
Oh, I like that
Right?
idea.
Something like that would
Oh,
be
yeah.
fun.
Oh, do a Halloween with it. I know you're a horror baby and you've never seen the classic horror film Halloween, but
Yeah.
that's how it goes. You're following somebody's eyes and you don't know whose eyes you're in.
Exactly. I think that would be interesting, and to try and figure out
Oh,
who it is based on how they're interacting with people. Or I mean, it might be a new character, right? Because we would probably like we would recognize everyone's voice and stuff like that. But if it's a new character on a different part of the severed floor, like that could be interesting to see how the right it would almost be like the other or not the other 48 days, but the episode of Lost where you see Desmond down in the hatch for the
yes.
first time, and you're just like, what is happening here? Something is
I love
different,
those. I
right?
love a sudden cut to an unidentified character in an
Yes.
unidentified setting that you don't know. I remember when The Good Place did the same thing and you met Michael McKean. I've seen subsequent shows do it. I don't even know if Lost is the first one to do that, but it
Probably
is
not.
perhaps the most prolific and historic, the Desmond reveal.
Yeah.
God, dude, I always want a show to do a Desmond on me.
Have it be Desmond, right? Have it be that actor. um I don't know. Yeah, I'm kind of at a loss. I hope the season comes sooner.
I'm
I
sure
don't
it
want
will.
this
I have
big
heard that.
wait.
It will
Yeah.
not take as much time to make season 3 as it did to make season 2. And of course, there
Yeah.
was like strikes and things
Of
in
course.
between.
Of course.
It
Yeah.
had a very explainable timeline.
Of course. But yeah, I think that's all I have on
Boy.
second half of Severance season 2. Do you have any other kind of final thoughts that you want to mention? She's
I
thinking. She's thinking.
I don't think so. I
All right.
just excited to see where we go next. Excited to catch up with all of these characters who were like back for a little
Yeah. Yeah. Some room to breathe, I think, would be
bit.
nice. But that is about it for our coverage. Our coverage of Severance season 2. So let's wrap things up right there. Melissa, where can the people contact you if they want to get in touch with you?
Just write me an email, just the old fashioned way. Just drop me a line at yourhostmelissa@gmail.com.
Go. If you guys want to stay up to date with me, I am at Yo Kyle Springer. And if you guys would like to stay up to date with all the stuff that we do here at the Whatnauts, we are at thewhatnauts.com on Blue Sky. So please go like, share, and subscribe in all the places. You guys know the deal with that. If you're watching this on YouTube, we got plenty more videos for you right over there. This has been number 292 of the Whatnauts Reactor Core. We will see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.